Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu, and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at BT07, and BT07 offers us lots of new and powerful cards to build and iterate on some new and existing decks. And today's deck that I'm going to be highlighting is going to be a updated version of the Machinedramon machine deck. So this was already a pretty interesting and unique deck that was made in the Classic Collection, and it did get a few cards to try to help you play your Machinedramon and make more efficient use of that Machinedramon. And we also can start thinking about splashing in a little bit of a blue package, just because if the goal is to play our Machinedramon, then we could replay him from our inheritable sources, because he's not really doing anything as an inheritable source, to be able to get his on-play ability again and to be able to create a bigger field using that type of strategy. So without further ado, on to the deck profile, starting off with the Digitamas, because I do want to split apart my Digimon as inheritable sources into real Digimon. I'm going to be running a blue low end, so that means I'm going to be running one copy of Upamon, just because it's a Digitama that has an easy, accessible way at allowing us to try to draw cards with it. Then on top of that, I'm going to be running 4 copies of DemiVeemon as the main Digitama, just because it's fulfilling that same goal at trying to allow us to draw cards. Just with the only blue rookie in our deck, it works a little bit better at trying to draw cards because of that jamming synergy, where its inheritable states when attacking once per turn. If this Digimon has jamming, then we get to draw 1 card, so every time we're going to be swinging with our level 3, hopefully we're going to be trying to draw cards, and this just makes that draw power more consistent. Next, on to the level 3s, I'm going to be running 4 copies of DemiVeemon as the only blue level 3 in the deck. So what this card is doing is it's just allowing us to use our blue ends to be aggressive with and to try to draw some additional cards with. So the jamming Veemon from BT03 is really good because of, well, his ability that he has jamming, so that way he could safely swing into the opponent's security without any fear of him actually dying, unless he checks like an option or security Digimon with an effect to actually delete him. So he's just a good recursive way at trying to deal some chip damage, while allowing us to use our blue eggs to try to draw some cards with. And speaking of drawing cards, the only other rookie I'm going to be running is 4 copies of Hagurumon. So Hagurumon, we don't necessarily care about digivolving on top of our Digitamas because we actually want his on-play ability to be used. So his on-play ability states that we get to trash 1 Digimon in our hand with Machine or Cyborg in its traits to be able to draw 2 cards. So it's essentially discard 1 to draw 2, which is pretty good because it's not only adding more cards into our hand, it's also helping fill up our trash, so that way we could set up our Machinedramon even more efficiently than we normally would be able to. Next, on to the level 4s, I'm only going to be running 2 copies of Mekanorimon. So this is not your traditional evolution style of deck where we're going from egg to level 6. We're actually playing this deck a lot differently than most other decks, and we're trying to play it more Megazoo-esque. So Mekanorimon here is a really powerful card to just hard play because he has a low and efficient play cost for being a level 4, and he is going to be the deck's main blocker outside of our Machinedramon trying to block, just because his ability to block is probably the best that we've ever seen out of all of the Digimon. His ability to restand himself when he deletes an opponent's Digimon just allows him to be able to block anything that's smaller than Mekanorimon, making him a very powerful blocker to be using. Next, on to the level 5s, and oh boy, there's a lot of level 5s in this deck. I'm going to be running 1 copy of Gigadramon. So Gigadramon can also be treated as a red Digimon while he's on the field, and what we're using him for, and a lot of these level 5s for, is their inheritable abilities. So Gigadramon allows us to have our Digimon get plus 2000 TP during the opponent's turn, so it makes our Digimon a little bit stronger during the opponent's turn, making it harder for them to react to our Digimon. Next, I'm going to be running 1 copy of Volcanomon, and Volcanomon is really only in the deck just because he's an alternative way to try to give our level 6s and potentially our level 7s an extra security tech plus for the opponent having a unsuspended Digimon in play. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Andromon, so we're not really trying to take advantage of his when digivolving ability to help search and set up our trash. We're just trying to look at this card for his inheritable ability to give our machines the blocker ability, which just allows our, well, level 6s to be able to block. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of MetalTyrannomon, so again, we're not trying to take advantage of his when Digivolving ability, we're trying to use this card for his inheritable ability to give our machines reboot. Next, I'm going to be running 1 copy of MetalMamemon. So MetalMamemon, again, we don't care about his when Digivolving ability, we're just looking at his inheritable ability to try to delete the opponent's Digimon with a play cost of 5 or less when our machines are going to be attacking. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Megadramon as just an alternative way to give the blocker ability to our higher level Digimon. Next, I'm going to be playing 1 copy of Megadramon from BT06, just because this gives our Digimon plus 2000 DP during our turn, making them a little bit more aggressive. Next, I'm going to be playing 1 copy of MetalGreymon. So this MetalGreymon actually does have a pretty decent on-play ability, so that way we could hard play him and then try to Digivolve up into our higher stages rather efficiently, because his on-play ability states that if we have a Tamer in play, doesn't necessarily matter what Tamer, but as long as we have one in play, then we get to gain 2 memory, basically making him a level 5 that costs 5, and that's pretty efficient already. And then on top of that, if we don't have a Tamer in play, then we get to play 1 red Tamer from our hand for free, so he also has that upside to help set up a red Tamer if you're running any. And then on top of that, he also still has a pretty good inheritable ability that we want to try to use, because his inheritable ability allows us to gain a memory when one of the opponent's Digimon gets deleted during our turn. So it combos with some of the other cards in our deck to try to delete the opponent's Digimon, and we could gain a memory for that deletion off of this inheritable. Next, I'm going to be running 1 copy of Megadramon. So this is the Classic Collection version of Megadramon, and it actually does have another pretty good on-play ability where we get to delete up to 2 of the opponent's Digimon with 3000 DP or less, so it can help pick apart the opponent's field full of rookies, and on top of that, he has, again, another really good inheritable ability that we want to try to take advantage of with giving our machine Digimon security attack +1. Next, I'm going to be running 1 copy of MetalGreymon from the Classic Collection. So this version of MetalGreymon has another pretty good when attacking ability, where when this Digimon attacks a player, we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 4000 DP or less. So again, trying to pick apart the opponent's field is pretty good. And then on top of that, the inheritable ability, again, is the main reason why we want to play this card, just because its inheritable ability allows our Digimon with Machine or Dragonkin to gain the piercing ability, so that way we could swing, have lots of security attack, trigger some various different effects, have reboot and blocker, and piercing is just adding to that list of keywords that we could be playing around with. And then the last level 5 of the deck is going to be 1 copy of Wargrowlmon, just because Wargrowlmon's inheritable ability is another way to give security attack plus for when we're deleting the opponent's Digimon, which is all we're looking to gain is his inheritable ability, but if we are able to just get him on the field and have him stick on the field, his when attacking to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 3000 DP or less is still pretty good at, again, trying to tear apart the opponent's field if they just have a whole bunch of rookies just chilling on the field. Next, on to the Megas, I'm going to be running 4 copies of the main Mega of the deck, Machinedramon. So this is the Classic Collection version of Machinedramon, and his on-play ability is the whole reason why the deck is kind of built the way the deck is built. So his on-play ability states that we get to place up to 5 level 5 red and or black cards with Cyborg in their traits, which all of our level 5s are, with different numbers from our hand or trash to the bottom of this Digimon's Digivolution source, and we get to gain a memory for each card placed this way. So if we put the full 5, then he's essentially costing 7. We do have to watch out for memory blocking Digimon, because they will shut off that part of the ability, making him even less efficient, but regardless, the fact that he is a Mega that could potentially cost 7 while filling up his inheritables with some very powerful abilities is really, really powerful. And then what's making this card even more powerful is the fact that he has 2 all-turns abilities that help protect himself. So his first all-turns ability states that this Digimon's DP can't be reduced, so Yellow's removal just basically can't touch him at all. And then his secondary all-turns ability states that when this Digimon would be deleted, we get to trash 2 level 5 Digimon from this Digimon's Digivolution source to prevent him from being deleted. So again, he just has another form of protection to try to keep him around as long as we could possibly keep him. And then the idea is once his inheritables are low, we just Digivolve something on top of him and then try to split apart his inheritable sources, so that way we could get an easy Machinedramon to be able to refill his inheritables and have a very powerful powerful Digimon on the field. But even then, just hard slamming Machinedramon after Machinedramon might be enough pressure to stop the opponent outright, depending on the types of hands and setups that you already had previously. And then the last level 6 of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Chaosdramon. So Chaosdramon is what's making this deck and this playstyle a little bit more viable, just because he is actually a pretty good machine to be playing around with in his own right, and he does have some synergy with how we want to use Machinedramon. So we could Evo him for 4 on top of a level 5 red or black Digimon, but what we actually are trying to do is use his ability to allow him to Digivolve on top of a Machinedramon for 1 and ignore the Digivolution requirements. So he's the card we're primarily going to want to try to Digivolve on top of our Machinedramon, so that way we could try to use another card to split apart Machinedramon from his inheritable sources, while Chaosdramon will also gain the benefit from those inheritable sources that are left underneath the Machinedramon. So that's already really strong, and then he also has a nice when Digivolving ability, where we get to place a red or black level 5 cyborg from our hand or trash on top of this Digimon's Digivolution source to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 6000 DP or less for each level 5 cyborg in this Digimon's Digivolution source. So again, just supporting the whole idea on trying to delete the opponent's Digimon, so that way we could safely use some of our abilities and control the opponent's field. And next, on to the level 7s, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Omnimon Alter S. So Omnimon Alter S is actually still a pretty decent card. The D-Digivolve ability could be relatively annoying depending on the setup that the opponent has, just because it is some form of removal, on top of the fact that he's also going to be deleting anything with 5000 DP or less when we Digivolve into him. So not only are we making the opponent's Digimon weaker, we're trying to put them in range of his ability. And the important thing about this card also is the fact that he also can Digivolve off of red or black, which is what we're playing around with our 2 level 6s. So no matter which level 6 we're using, he's never going to be a dead card. And then on top of that, he has a nice when attacking ability where we get to return a level 6 Digimon from his inheritable sources back to our hand to be able to make this Digimon unblockable, which is very powerful. So that way, if the opponent just has a blocker, it doesn't matter because Omnimon's going to swing anyway. And the fact that we actually have the ability to try to stack 2 level 6s in his inheritable sources means we could actually use this ability more than once, so we could possibly think about trying to close out the game because of the fact that the opponent won't be able to stop Omnimon Alter S. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Omnimon X Antibody. So Omnimon X Antibody, we're not necessarily trying to Digivolve with on top of our level 6s. We're actually trying to Digivolve this on top of our other Omnimons. So the fact that he could Digivolve on top of another Omnimon for 3 is the primary reason why we want to play him. So in case we can't necessarily close out the game with Alter S or Zwart defeat, we have the ability to Digivolve into Omnimon X Antibody to help stall out the game a little bit, because he has not only a really good removal ability, but a really good defensive ability too. So his when attacking ability just allows us to delete any Digimon with lower DP than him. So again, solid removal. And his secondary ability, where during the opponent's turn, when your opponent's Digimon attacks, we get to trash 2 of this Digimon's Digivolution source to just end the attack. So if we have a whole bunch of inheritable sources that we can't use because he's not a machine, then we could start ditching them in order to try to stop the opponent's attack and fill up our trash, so when we replay another Machinedramon, they're already set up in our trash to be able to reuse our Machinedramon more efficiently. And then the last level 7 of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Omnimon Zwart Defeat. So Omnimon Zwart Defeat, we are mostly trying to play him for his security ability, just because having a free level 7 pop out of nowhere is really powerful, but we also want to try to take advantage of his when Digivolving ability too, just because we need to try to have a cheap way to efficiently Digivolve into a level 7, and he's one of the best and cheaper options in terms of evolution cost. So his when Digivolving ability allows us to delete one of the opponent's Tamers, and while being one of the only cards to interact with Tamers, it's a pretty important thing to try to stop the opponent from setting up a wide field of Tamers and start limiting some of their options. And then his on delete ability is just icing on the whole cake, de-incentivizing the opponent from deleting him because he's going to delete one of the opponent's Digimon as a result. Next, on to the options, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Ultimate Connect. So Ultimate Connect, for all intents and purposes, is going to be the Hammer Spark of the deck, but it's actually a little bit better than Hammer Spark because it actually allows us to do some various other things as well. So what this card is doing is, for the low cost of 1, we get to trash 1 level 5 Digimon with Cyborg in its trait from our hand in order to gain 2 memory and draw a card. So not only is it replacing the card that we discarded, it's helping discard cards to fill up our trash for our Machinedramon, and it's effectively gaining us 1 memory because we spent 1 to gain 2. It also has the security ability of activating its main, so it's just as powerful as Hammer Spark, even in security, potentially taking away 2 memory from the opponent while also helping us set up during their turn as well. And then as far as the blue option package of the deck goes, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Tidal Wave to try to help split apart our inheritable sources to be able to replay our Machinedramons in some various different ways. So Tidal Wave here has the nice main ability where we get to choose up to 2 Digimon cards in the Digivolution source off of one of our Digimon and play them for free. So the whole intended synergy is we're going to Digivolve into Chaosdramon relatively efficiently, just because he could Digivolve for 1 off of our Machinedramon, and then we're going to end our turn with using Tidal Wave to split apart our inheritable sources to be able to replay a Machinedramon from the inheritable source and another level 5 Digimon. Doesn't necessarily matter which level 5, just a level 5, and that's why we have a really powerful mixed bag of level 5s that we want to be using from. But the fact that Machinedramon also, his on-play ability will help us gain memory, makes this card also even more efficient depending on how many inheritable sources we could shove under him. And its security ability activates its main, so even during the opponent's turn, we could potentially use Machinedramon relatively efficiently to gain memory and shut off their turn, while playing another Machinedramon. And then the last option card of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Kaizernail. So Kaizernail is basically doing the exact same thing as Tidal Wave, just for less memory, and it's only separating 1 Digimon and not 2. And then lastly, onto the Tamers, I'm only going to be running 4 copies of Analog Youth. So Analog Youth could really be any Tamer you feel like you want to run to help the deck overall, but I feel like Analog Youth is already a really good Tamer that the deck kind of wants, because his on-play ability states that we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck and add 1 Digimon card among them into our hand, and then we get to trash the rest. So ideally, we're using this card to try to dig out our Machinedramon, and at worst, we're using him to try to set up our trash to make our Machinedramon live as quickly and efficiently as we possibly can. And then on top of that, he has a nice secondary ability that doesn't necessarily matter a whole lot for this deck, but it could come in handy, where during all turns, when one of your level 5 or higher Digimon with Digivolution source gets deleted, we get to suspend this Tamer, and if we do, we get to gain 1 memory and hatch 1 Digi-Egg card into an empty space in our raising area. So we're just using this to potentially gain a memory for when our higher level Digimon gets deleted, but the way Machinedramon works, we don't want him to get deleted, and he has ways to prevent him from getting deleted, thus making this effect not as good, but still kind of good, because we'd still have level 7s and Chaosdramon that still could get deleted to be able to use this ability with. And then there's still just a whole bunch of other tech and tools that you could think about utilizing depending on how you want to build the deck and what you want to gain out of the deck. So if you don't necessarily like the whole blue package, you could run a traditional evolution style of deck and use cards like Tsunorizumon and other powerful inheritable sources to try to make our Digimon a little bit stronger and a little bit more annoying. So we could use Tsunorizumon and a whole bunch of the toy Agumons and even Junkmon to try to use their inheritable abilities for our level 5s to try to make our level 5s a little bit stronger, or even our level 6s if we want to go that far in the evolution chain. Most of the time you don't necessarily need to go that far, just because we want to swing with our level 5s and we still want to hard play our Machinedramon, but regardless, we still have lots of good inheritable abilities we could try to take advantage of. And then we also even have a nice sub package in the form of the Commandramon sub package, just because, well, Commandramon is utilizing the low end, which is something Machinedramon doesn't necessarily have a whole lot of, so we could play the Machinedramon high end and then a Commandramon low end. Then we do have some other cards to help synergize and support the whole machine archetype, which is going to be in the form of Gigadramon, just because Gigadramon himself is a blocker, and his inheritable ability just allows us to try to use our level 5s a little bit more efficiently, because he's also adding some extra card draw into the deck and extra discard into the deck to try to help set up our Machinedramon. Then we also do have black hybrids that we could play around with. Even though black hybrids did get the short end of the stick as of right now, we still have some hybrids, which is better than no hybrids, to be able to utilize our Tamers to try to swing for game when we break all of the opponent's security and they're unable to stop an extra attack out of nowhere. Then we do have some other level 5 inheritable abilities for both black and red. Then if you want an alternative at level 7, you could think about running Susanomon, just because of that rainbow evolution allows us to utilize him relatively easily on top of any of our level 6s. You could also think about using Ragnalordmon for a very similar style approach, just because he's filling red and black, and depending on the synergies and stacks that you can make with him, he could still be a very powerful Digimon. Same thing with the BT01 Omnimon, just because his ability isn't once per turn. So if we go Machinedramon, Chaosdramon, we could potentially swing 3 times with that Omnimon, making him a very sizable threat for the opponent to deal with, assuming he sticks on the field. So there's just a slew of different level 7s that we could already start thinking about and changing around, depending on what you want to use. And then we do have some other really powerful option cards that we could be running in the form of Final Subukan Punch, as just some extra oomph that you could give to the deck. Then we do have a slew of removal options in black, so we could think about running Iron Fisted Onslaught and cards like Ultimate Flare as just really good security threats for the opponent to deal with, or just good option cards to try to delete the opponent's Digimon outright when things get too scary. Then we do have Black Memory Boost to try help dig out our black cards. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of the Black Memory Boost as of right now, just because, well, we are also running a whole bunch of other colors too, so it's going to make this card less consistent, but the delay ability is still good to think about nonetheless, to just have an easy way to gain some instant memory. And speaking of good memory boosts to gain some extra memory, we also do have Flame Memory Boost, because we are still running a couple of red cards to try to optimize our damage and give alternative ways of giving Security Attack Plus, on top of the fact that, again, it's another memory boost for that instant memory at a later turn. Then we do have a slew of red option cards that we could also think about running, just because, again, we're still running some red Digimon, so they could potentially be online, especially if you run a red Tamer or anything else. So Gaia Force here is just the example of a very powerful red removal card, but there's just a whole bunch of them that you could think about running, depending on which ones you actually want and need. And then we do have alternative Tamers that you could think about running. So you could think about running the BT02 Black Tie, just to try to help not only fix our memory, but to also DP boost our Digimon during the opponent's turn, making them stronger blockers than they normally would be. On top of the fact that we also have Izzy as another memory fixing Tamer to help try to rig the top of our deck with. And then we also do have some duo Tamers that we could think about utilizing. Izzy and Joe is probably just one of the best duo Tamers that we have for an easy way to gain some additional memory for the opponent literally just having Digimon in play. And then on top of that, when our black Digimon do get deleted, which sometimes will happen, he'll also add some extra card draw into the deck. But if you did want to try to double down on some of the Omnimon synergy that we have going, you could even run Matt and Tai, just because it allows our Omnimons to punch a little bit harder than they normally would. And then we even have some red Tamers that we could think about running in the form of red Tai, just because, well, we're already filling up our Digimon's inheritable sources, so if we want to try to use Chaosdramon and have him actually have some extra damage, then we could easily use Tai to be able to give him Security Attack +1, on top of being a memory fixing Tamer. I don't necessarily think any other red Tamer is worth running, but if you really wanted to just run a cheap red Tamer, then you could even think about running the starter deck Tai, just for some extra DP boost. But for the most part, this is just my interpretation of what I think a Machinedramon deck is going to look like in BT07. I really do like the blue splash and built around the blue splash, but like I stated before, you could build around a black egg, you could even build around a red egg, depending on what you want to actually utilize and gain out of the deck. And I think no matter which way you build it, it's going to be a relatively interesting deck, just because Machinedramon plays more like Megazoo, where the whole idea is just hard slamming him over and over again to try to get some good and recursive value, while having a very sticky and hard to deal with Digimon. So I think that's making it a very fun and powerful deck, and I definitely think it's going to be one of the more underrated decks in the BT07 format, just because all of the attention is going to be on hybrid. hybrids. You could even think about incorporating some hybrids if you wanted to in this style of deck too, to really try to help mix things up, so maybe the purple hybrids would be good, but I digress, and it just shows lots of flexibility and versatile options that you could use when building your own version of this deck. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.